Mike, I didn't know you were so popular. Good evening. Welcome to the Heritage Foundation and our Douglas and Sarah Allison Auditorium. We, of course, welcome those who join us on all of these occasions on our heritage.org website. Would ask everyone here in-house, especially Mr. Gonzalez, to make sure your cell phones are turned off as we prepare to begin. It's always appreciated by those recording events, Michael. We will, of course, post the program sometime tomorrow on our website for everyone's future reference. As you noticed coming in, we do have copies of Mr. Kilmeade's book available. He will be personalizing and signing those copies following the session tonight, and we will do that up on this stage, purchasing outside, but then coming up here for the signing. It's now my pleasure to turn the program over to Mike Gonzalez, Heritage's Vice President for Communications. Mike?
Thank you. Thank you, John. Well, thank you very much for being here. I'm often, well, not often, always asked to introduce people who are much more famous than myself. And tonight's victim is Brian Kilmeade. You know him from Fox and Friends, the #1 news show at the time slot. That must really drive the mainstream media mad. The fact that by far they have more amongst the Bain demo that even the other shows do. But Brian's not here to talk about that today. He's not here as Brian, the TV star. He's here as Brian, the historian. He's here to talk about his book, his recent book. He's written other books, by the way. George Washington's Secret Six, the spy ring that saved the American Revolution. The group of citizen spies known as the Culper spy ring. Speaking about making the mainstream media mad, my other prop today is this thing in my hand is the copy of the New York Times bestseller list. In the middle of it, you will see Brian's name right there. It's a fantastic congratulations. This is a very good start for him. This will also make the great lady very upset, especially since he's sharing this real estate with Charles Krauthammer and Bill O'Reilly. So conservatives read against everything you've heard about us. Brian deserves his place in this most sought after of real estates. He tells great history, and he doesn't forget that he has to tell stories as well. Stories about the protagonists of history. History does not need to be dry. It was not dry for the people who participated in it. So it is important for people to have done what Brian does, because history buffs, I read history, and they will read any dry old history, but people who are most in need of knowing about this, perhaps maybe well-read in other areas, will not read dry history. So this is why it's so important to have historians such as you who writes about it in this style. He got his inspiration for this book while driving around Long Island. I am myself a former resident of Long Island. In fact, one of my sons was born in Port Washington. The whole place is full of Revolutionary War memorabilia. It's great that you decided to do this, and you say you did it because you wanted that these 6 spies, Robert Townsend, Austin Rowe, Caleb Brewster, and the others, not to be forgotten. And that is a very noble effort. And it's a very good reason to sit down and write a book. We're very happy that he sat down and wrote that book, and we're very happy that he's going to stand up today and talk about it. Brian?
All right. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. All right. Thank you very much, and thanks for coming out today. Special thanks to Mike and company and Senator DeMint, who said, hey, why don't you come down and speak at the Heritage Foundation about the book, even before one copy was sold. And I think that's pretty cool for someone to say, hey, I like the book, I like the premise, I'd love for you to come down and talk to our people. And that's why it was so important for me to make that stop today, right after a brief stop with the 700 Club, and then over here, over in Washington, D.C., and my privilege to be here today. So first off, the Fox network is successful with or without me. What they've done is unbelievable. For me to be there for the last 15 years, I only missed about 3 months of it, has been incredible. They've rewritten history, television history. And for those who people think it's Republican or a Democratic channel, if we're a 50-50 country, why is it that 3/4 of the audience watches Fox? So does not the rest of the country not have TVs? There's a difference because we go out to tell the whole story. And Roger Ailes knows how to pick people that get the message across. Most of all, he lets people be themselves. For better or for worse, this is me. If you don't like me on television, bad news for me, you don't like me in real life either. So In terms of this book, I wrote 2 other books. The Games Do Count, because I wanted to show that people in life that played sports and went on to do other things did not waste their times playing sports. If you tried as hard as you can to be successful in sports, it didn't work out, it's still okay. Then I thought, I'm going to expand this and include people that made success in sports because they're done at 35 regardless, and they have a whole life ahead of them. If they didn't learn anything in sports, they're not going to be successful after. And everyday people as well as historical people. So I had Lincoln in a book with some of the best female athletes of all time. And that's called It's How You Play the Game. Now, this is a book I've been thinking about and researching really since 1992. And I thought, how could this happen? How could I grow up on Long Island? How could I go to Long Island University and not even know until I graduated college that this took place? And the way it took place was totally random. I was sitting on 25A, which is a historic thoroughfare on Long Island. And it's historic, and you see signs, Washington was here, and Nathan Hale was here. And you wonder, well, that's interesting. How come I never knew that? Instead, I'm visiting organs that used to be at Radio City for my school trip, remembering not to bring a carbonated drink on the bus with me because it would eventually explode come lunchtime. So I'm saying I would love to learn about these spies. So one day I see this guy with a hand guide, a metal hand guide, and they're painting a line on the side of the road. And I said, excuse me, sir, I always thought a machine did that. And he laughed. He says, a machine does do that, but this is going to wash away. This is to commemorate so many years since Washington came to Long Island to thank his spies. And I thought, what are you talking about? Thank his spies. And then another gentleman walked out and goes, oh, yeah, it's in this book. It was written in 29 by Morton Pennypacker. And he goes, you can go take it out. He looked at it, and I go, this is amazing. So I actually went to the library, and I took out a young adult book because I'm not that bright. And then I found, because Pennypacker's book was out, to be honest. So then I took out Pennypacker's book, and in Pennypacker's book, the actual letters. So it was no longer someone's opinion about what Washington did or didn't do. I'm reading what Washington wrote. That hit Culper Jr., that was his nickname, the Culper spy ring. His, your intelligence is so good and your work is so great, I can't imagine I have enough money to be able to repay you. That got my interest. And then I see the way Washington, like Vince Lombardi, was trying to tell Culper Sr., come on, don't tell me how many more ships, don't tell me how many guns, tell me what they're doing. By the time I get your information, it's not good enough. Pushing them along. Knowing that their lives were in danger with one slip up, knowing that the British were everywhere and ruthless at that time all over, knowing what they were sacrificing in terms of their families. But they were all sacrificing, and it looked so grim. So I thought, if I could tell the story, starting from Pennypacker, he made his discovery of the last spy by doing a handwriting analysis of the last spy. And when that last spy came together, and they were able to piece together their correspondence as their real people after, the puzzle pieces started coming together. Boom, 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 boom. But then came the Depression. Then came World War II. So I went back and I thought, when they found Robert Townsend as the last spy, was it a big deal? The New York Times had a little article on it. Local historian makes major find. But again, World War II was looming. The Depression was there. There was, I found the original handwriting analyst who was located in Manhattan, the best in the world, to say, congratulations, by finding Robert Townsend and matching him up with Culper Sr., you have found the last spy. Can you imagine the pride that Teddy Roosevelt would have knowing that he had a fellow patriot in Oyster Bay? Because literally, Roosevelt's Sagamore Hill was right here, literally a quarter mile away was Raynham Hall, where Robert Townsend actually was. And then where Washington was the Young House. He stayed there overnight. Teddy Roosevelt was right here. So I'm seeing American history right in front of my eyes. So I thought, everybody can do this book better than me. I'm sure someone else is going to come along. And there were little books, and then I go to the Spy Museum with my family, and they have a little area. Then I hear Mount Vernon's going to roll out a look at Washington spies, and I said, this is getting bigger. And I saw Alexander Rose did a pretty cool book about 6 years ago, and I go, if I could approach this thing like I would at Fox, like a story that I wanted to develop. And I could approach it like there's a deadline. So I got a deal 2 years ago, hooked up with Don Yaeger, who's written 23 books. And he's in Tallahassee, and I'm here. And with his staff and my guys, we worked on it, and we pushed it forward. And we have brand new information in this book. And we've closed the circle on this book in a streamlined way because Washington had a lot of ancillary spies. He had a little ring here, a little ring there. We think it's really these 6. And other people did some work periodically, but these 6 did 3.5 years of work. And I would argue that they represent America in that We know Washington's great. Nathan Hale was tremendous. We know Alexander Hamilton was outstanding, and Benjamin Franklin's like no other, and we should learn about them. But what if I told you that an extraordinary American owned a tavern? His name was Austin Rowe. What if I told you that a longshoreman would get 6 guys together, weld a cannon to his whaleboat, weave in and out of the Long Island Sound for 3.5 years for no money with a letter in his boat to a courier to get it to Washington? What if I told you that a farmer would sacrifice the welfare of his family and side with us meaning Americans, which we turned out to be, and say, I'm going to do it? Even though he looked probably like Steve Buscemi, he was sickly and always had a problem. He was a guy that was truly believing in the cause. His family got beat up. His dad was almost beaten to death because of it, because he suspected him, but he didn't die. What if I told you that Austin Rowe, that tavern owner, would turn over the bar, would hop from behind the bar, put somebody else there, go 55 miles through British troops into Manhattan because his cover story was, I got to get supplies. And then hop on a ferry, get across, and go to Robert Townsend, who was Culper Jr., and his cover story was, hey man, I got a business. I'm a grocery store owner. But he also had 2 ears. He was able to listen to the British, see what they were up to. He was also able to work for a printing press whose job was to interview fellow officers in the British officers. Guess what? They would tell him stuff, their exploits and their missions ahead of time. He would take that information and say, great, there's your column. Then he'd grab the intelligence and tell Washington, here's your intel. So James Rivington, we found out for sure that he was absolutely a spy, even though he wrote the Rivington Royal Gazette, which was published and was successful. It was right in the middle of Manhattan and went right back to the Britain. If you were a guy that wanted to be looked at as an up-and-coming British soldier, you might go up to Rivington and say, I got a great story for you. And Rivington would say, great. He'd write the column and keep the intelligence. We found out later, after a couple of years, clearly he flipped to our side. He was sending it back to Washington. He was the one who hired Robert Townsend. We thought for a while unknowingly. Our research reveals knowingly. We knew exactly what he was doing. How do we know that Rivington was aboard on this? Because he wrote the Rivington Royal Gazette, a loyalist newspaper. Because when Washington went to New York, according to his step-grandson, George Washington Custer, I think I got that right, that one of his first stop was James Rivington. Why would he do that? Go to see a loyalist newspaper editor, printer. Why? Because it turns out, according to his grandson, he gave the naval codes, the British naval codes, to Washington en route to the Battle of Yorktown, who handed it over to a group, because he has no navy, to the French. They were able to anticipate almost every move the British were making prior to them making it, and Yorktown was such a decisive win. So we see what these guys are doing. The farmer, the dry goods owner, the bartender, the longshoreman, the printer, and of course, we have 355, a woman that we believe was a socialite who infiltrated, might have even been British, into the social circles. The British were drinking like fish. New York, just like today, was Party Town, USA. It was also the British headquarters, and she had her ear to the ground. And there's no doubt about it, if you look at the letters, they say we have an agent coming into the fray. My words, not his. There's going to be of extreme benefit to the ring. And all of a sudden, the intelligence picked up. And it dropped off when Major Andre, who would later be linked to Benedict Arnold, would leave town to go on a South Carolina mission or any southern mission. When he would leave town, the intelligence would not dry up, but would get very bland. When he came back, it picked up. Major Andre, as everyone knows, was the one who, and most people know, who was supposed to rendezvous with Benedict Arnold. But he was stopped in between before he could do that. Arnold unfortunately got away before they could get him, but he was not able to give away West Point, which was the ultimate mission. And if you think about it, if we give away West Point, we lose the entire Hudson, the war's over, the mission's done. America probably doesn't look like it does today. We certainly don't win the war in the way in which we won it. So Washington's goal was, after he lost the Battle of Brooklyn, he said, we're going to wear them out. We're going to show them we have more endurance. We are going to harass them, but we will never face them head to head. The biggest battle of the war was one of the first battles of the war. Head to head, we had no shot. But if we outthought them and we could anticipate their next move, we could be victorious. And that's exactly what happened. It wouldn't have happened without his spies. If Washington didn't know how to commission, if he didn't understand how to get people out there who know how to trust, if he didn't learn it during the French-Indian War and throughout his entire career, it wouldn't have been successful. And that's why the subtitle is The Spy Ring That Saved the American Revolution. So I just said to myself, I'm sold on this, but maybe I'm convincing myself of this. Before I got the book deal, I said, let me go to the CIA and turn myself in. Just kidding. So I go, let me go to the CIA. The good news is The bad news is when you turn up on the terror watch list, I was third on Alawaki's watch list, which is interesting, isn't it? And who are the other two? I could beat them next time. So the CIA gets in touch with you, especially to say, hey, listen, you popped up on a list and it's not the New York Times list. You should really, we should really keep an eye on you because we have some friends over there because Fox is friendly with the intelligence because we're pro-American. And they said, listen, you should really take this serious. And they checked out my house. So before I did this book deal, I kept in touch with these guys who checked out my house for free one day. That was their Saturday. They checked out the area, and they say, you are so naked, it's ridiculous. I tried to keep the story from my wife. So he goes, yeah. So I just said, some of my friends are coming over. I didn't know the guys, but we were on the phone. But when they showed up, one guy was 6'4", looked like he could start for the Giants. And the other guy was 6'6", and looks like he could substitute for Grizzly Adams, a successful 1970s TV series. And he comes over to the house, fresh off Afghanistan, where he wouldn't be detected, but in Massapequa, he stood out. And he checked it out. And then, as I get off on a tangent, but I'll never forget, he went up to my wife and he said, what is your escape plan? So it was like a bad episode of Three's Company, where you don't tell the whole story. So he's like, to go outside? She goes, what if you have to get away from the second floor? She goes, I'd go down the stairs. He goes, what if there was no time? I'd make time. So it wasn't going well. And then he goes, do you have a rope ladder? She goes, we have stairs. So these guys, I got friendly with these guys. I spent the afternoon with them. And they also told me when I brought them to a restaurant how they could take down the whole restaurant just in case we have to, which is... So I said, hey, listen, can I get in there and talk to your guys to see if I'm overestimating the Culper spy ring? He goes, you're not, but I'll get you in. So we get in there, and they told me, not only am I not on the wrong path, but they teach a lot of the methods today to our men and women before they get on a mission that these men and women, one woman, learned in the middle of a mission. What they learned in the middle of a war, we teach people before they go to war. So the dead drops, the encryption, the invisible ink, before the internet, are all things that show tremendous savvy and determination and spines of steel. And I thought it should be a story that should be told. Now, I hoped it would sell. Like anybody, you want to be successful. The pre-sales were slow because I didn't talk about it. I don't want to wear people out on television. Plus, I'm not going to use Fox News to sell a book. I'll explain a book and see if people want it. And now it has gone so well. Everybody is stunned. And unfortunately, I think that somebody's writing the book, reprinting the book with carbon paper and handwriting it because they can't keep them in stock. So hopefully will people continue to buy it. And here's why. Because I think I'm giving an example of 6 ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things, much like people in the audience right now, people that might be watching in days ahead once this is put online, people that might be reading the book. It shows you that the so-called nondescript people who fight the war, who are in Afghanistan right now, in my mind, who were in Iraq before, and who are in Somalia we don't know about and doing great things to stop the pirates, and even work in the PX in the middle of Kuwait. They do it for the country. They do it because they believe in the mission. They don't want applause. They don't want acclaim. Do you know these spies only wanted their expenses taken care of? They didn't want even to meet Washington because they thought it would have taken away for the reason why they did it. They also took a lot of guff after the war for people walking up to them and go, what are you celebrating? You didn't fight. In fact, Benjamin Talmadge, who I'm sure most of this audience knows that I didn't, but Major Talmadge worked next to George Washington. So instead of depending on a great historian to tell me what Washington was like, his kids got on him and they said, Dad, what you've done already in your life, you have to write down. So in his last year's 77-page biography, I recommend everyone read, he brought me the Revolutionary War. And right before, the British, when they lost Yorktown, they didn't really believe it. I didn't know this. They stayed in New York an extra couple of years. So Washington's finally losing patience, going, we're going in. And Talmadge says, wait a second. We got some guys in here. You got to give me a couple of days. So Talmadge, he goes, they could be in a lot of trouble unless we get him out. So he went in, got him out under a flag, truce flag. They met, and he goes, Washington's tired of waiting. You're done. So basically Washington comes in, rides into town. These guys had gotten out already. The one that stayed was James Rivington with his cover secure. Washington went and visited him, and essentially, according to his grandson, there was some gold exchanged for his exploits for what he did. So those other guys got out, and then when Washington got elected president in 1790, he goes, I got to go thank him. As far as we could tell, only Austin Rowe met with him because he stayed at Rowe's Tavern. We just think logic says he came downstairs. Austin Rowe, if you go to foxandfriends.com, you can see that I went to all the places because they all exist today, including the same bar, Rowe's Tavern. Someone lives in it. It looks like a house has been moved to a different location off the main road, but it's still there. And then you also see a quarter mile away is the old Woodhull Farm, which now is about 10 houses. It was really the whole area overlooking the coves where the boats came in and out and where the messages would be exchanged. So we went there. So logic would tell you that he met Washington, but we have no proof of it. Washington and Talmadge promised to keep their secret, and they did. And why is it important? Because Benedict Arnold knew how successful this ring was. And we have letters to Talmadge and to Washington. Hey, introduce me to this ring. I got to meet these guys. You got to show me who they are. If Washington didn't have the integrity that we know he had and wasn't true to his word like we know he is, he would have given up those guys and said, you're a general. You know, we've been fighting together for the longest time. I have tremendous respect for you. Let me just tell you who they are. He didn't give up, not even one of them, or else they already been wiped out. We do believe when Arnold got back into New York City after his cover was blown and Andre was captured, he went after him. And we believe that's when 355 got captured because he rounded up a whole bunch of people that might have overheard some conversations about a major American officer looking to change sides. And we believe that she might be on a manifest on one of those prison ships, could have lost her life. By the paperback, I believe with the help the American people have given me, with emails coming from around the country since, I think we might have an educated guess on who exactly it was, because we know the ring cratered. We know they went underneath, and we know that Culper Jr. had a hard time. He really had to be cajoled to get back in the ring after Arnold was let loose because he was afraid for his welfare and destroyed that 355s could have lost their life. So we were fascinated with a story that involved Nathan Hale, because it opens up with Nathan Hale, George Washington, Benedict Arnold, all has supporting players. We said, what if we told that story of average Americans do an extraordinary thing for a cause, not for the money, not for the fame? Does it remind you of anyone? It's like the people coming back in camouflage today. Not the Navy SEALs or the elite. They don't do it for the money. They make about $35,000. They don't do it for the fame. They can't talk about their missions, not even to their family. And if you ever want to get an American soldier to recoil and shut up, praise them. They just point to somebody else. They don't want to hear it. And I happen to know 3 of the guys on the bin Laden mission. I knew them before because we do a lot of stuff with soldiers during work and after work. And I know them after. And they felt great for what they did. But they don't really want a lot of praise. It doesn't really, that's the only time I've ever seen them look awkward and uncomfortable in their own skin because they just feel as though they've done missions like that before, dozens of them in a week, harder than that. They don't want praise. And I thought, what does this remind me of? Well, the guy in a nondescript grave in Oyster Bay, Long Island, where you go through a fence, he's in the back of a barn, it's the original headstone. Well, that reminds me of Abraham Woodhull, who's also got a mini grave, but he has a little bit bigger because he became a judge afterwards. Caleb Brewster has a few blocks named after him. But for the most part, Rivington Place is in Manhattan today. You can go there, and I have in the piece where the Rivington's Gazette actually stood, so they had a sense of who he was back then. And I went to Greenwich Street in Manhattan, where Robert Townsend had his dry goods shop. So, and Francis's Tavern, we also include Francis Tavern. That's where Washington said goodbye to his officers, then went on a barge and said, good night, everybody. That was 1783. At his side was the man who put the ring together, Major Benjamin Talmadge. So they brought this to life for me, and all these great people in Setauket, in Oyster Bay, at the New York Historical Society, at various people that I've met, brought all this story to life. So I would go, if you were an expert, and spend time with them. I'd go to their museum. I would bring my kids so they would see the invisible ink, because that's how they communicated, with invisible ink and writing between the lines most of the time. So if you were caught, well, what do you have? Well, I have a blank page. Well, I got the Bible, or I have a novel. I'm like, what is the problem? But Washington knew, go to page 77, pour some stain on that book, and that message would come to life. And then they went further. They went even deeper. They went with encryption. So Washington would be number 711. Woodhull would be number 712. Robert Townsend would be 714. New York might have number 86. Setauket might have a different number. So you could be reading this. If you found the invisible ink, if you found the right page, you read it, every third word's a number. You can't figure it out. So that person might be in trouble, but the ring will be fine. And they weren't in trouble for the most part, although we do chronicle some near misses and some guys that lost their nerve, like Underhill, where Robert Townsend said, I will not give any more messages to him. I'm risking my life. He gets panicky. He rips up my notes. I can't have it anymore. So you see real life drama in the whole thing. They're not this slick group that does everything perfect. For example, John Jay came up with the invisible ink stuff. So he comes up with it, and Washington says, whatever you do, treat this like gold. We don't have a lot of it. It's called sympathetic stain. Well, Woodhull's writing a letter, and he's pouring some stuff on it, and then in come his sisters to surprise him, knocks over the stain. He's got to go write Washington in regular ink and say, listen, I knocked over my concoction. I know you're mad at me. And they kind of had a laugh about it, but it was, don't let this happen again. So there was a human element, there was a slick element to it, there was an elite element to it, and there was a lot of sense that this whole thing was destined because everyone was doing such extraordinary things. Kind of because the British militarized everybody by being so thuggish and so brutal with the people of Long Island and New York. If you were indifferent before the war, once it started, you weren't indifferent anymore. When they take your house, force you into one room, abuse your women, take your crops, I kind of know what side I'm on. And that's what happened. So we tried to do that in 236 pages with a lot of help from a lot of people, and we tried to tell it in a compelling way. And if it wasn't for Bill O'Reilly showing me that Americans care with killing Lincoln and killing Kennedy, I thought, wow, what do they have to say about Lincoln? What do they have to say about Washington? Well, I saw 5 Washington books on the bestseller list, so I know there's an appetite. I saw that if people tell a compelling story about an assassination, 2 of them, people will still pick up the book that are non-political junkies and historical aficionados. So I thought if I could present it, maybe we can expose it in a different way and humanize Washington even more by looking at those letters. And that's what we tried to do. And that's why I think people are buying it, because people can't get enough of a good American story, because I think we can relate to it. I really have trouble relating to Washington. He's on the side of a mountain because we don't get guys like that much. But I can relate to a bartender. My dad had a bar. I can relate to a farmer. I go out east even today. I could see the way it used to be out east on Long Island. Dry goods owner, how many grocery stores we've all been to today, or a small business guy trying to make it work, who has an ear to the ground as well as trying to sell you stuff. And of course, I can relate to a reporter and do an extraordinary thing for the cause. And that's why I wrote George Washington's Secret Six. And I hope everybody likes it. And if you could spread the word about it, that would be great. And hopefully they'll start printing more of them, so we won't have a problem.
We'll take some questions.
Yeah,
right?
do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, just state your name, and if you represent the organization, let me know. Sir, right there. Right here.
Al Milliken, AM Media. In your research, what did you find out about George Washington's religious faith?
Well, this is what I found. That he was, to me, these are my words, spiritual, but not overtly religious. He wasn't saying, let us pray. But if you see the Battle of Brooklyn, and you see the fact is that he sat around at a table, and I think that was Mifflin, General Mifflin was sitting there, and he said, essentially, we're backed up to a corner in Brooklyn Heights, and he goes, we have to pray for a miracle. If anyone has any miracles, don't save them, let's use them. And I also think that by reading Talmage work, that Washington had a belief that he was destined for great things, and he was never going to get wounded in war or hurt in war, because he would be leading into battle, urging his men on a horse, on a white horse, in the middle of a firefight, and would not flinch. Talmage talks about how the first time he heard a shot, he wanted to go into a hole, and where Washington did act like he didn't even hear it, because he did believe he was a man of destiny, but not because he was a man who was destined for great power. He thought America was destined for great things. So what I found is not overtly religious, not saying demand people to pray, but clearly felt as though he was working for a higher power, and that higher power was behind him.
Sir, right here. If you can wait for the mic.
Well, I'm sorry, sir, what made you ask that question?
Well, in the limited research and things I've learned about George Washington, it seems a lot unknown. I mean, and a lot of his prayers, he used language, but it doesn't seem like he was really praying to a personal God, in a way that a devout Christian would.
Right.
Yeah.
He also urged religion for his soldiers, because he felt as though if he can instill, and he was unsuccessful sometimes, because they're soldiers, the young 20-year-olds who were wondering where the next, if they were going to survive the next day. But he was always trying to get values and ethics in them, and a fear of God works towards a good soldier.
Yes. Did Washington think that Benedict Arnold was a problem? Is that why he walled him off, or was it just a routine procedure not to tell anybody anything?
Routine procedure. In fact, I found out something through additional research for the book after I closed it, is that Talmadge and Washington took the whole interception of Major Andre's, the true secret behind it, to their grave, and we believe that's also linked to the spy ring, because Washington never talked overtly about the spy ring. So that's just it. I don't think he suspected Benedict Arnold at all. If there was a Benedict Arnold expert in the audience that felt differently, I'd love to hear it, but I have not seen that he anticipated that Arnold was going to turn coat.
Anyone else? Anybody else have a question? Okay, so would you do some signing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll do the signing right here on stage. If you want to line up here. Yeah, line up right here. Brian, why don't you sit here?
Okay.
Thank you very much.